The morning mist clung to the alien landscape like ghostly fingers, obscuring the jagged purple rocks that jutted from Kepler 442b's surface. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his helmet's display, watching the atmospheric readings flicker across his visor. Oxygen levels were acceptable. Gravity was roughly Earth normal, but something felt wrong about this place. The silence was too complete, too unnatural. "Echo team, sound off," Rodriguez whispered into his comm unit, his voice barely audible even to himself. The 6-man SEAL team had been inserted into this valley 3 hours ago, tasked with investigating the mysterious disappearance of a research station that had gone dark 6 months prior. "Echo 2, all clear," came the response from Petty Officer Chen, positioned 50 meters to the east behind a cluster of crystalline formations that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Echo 3, negative contacts," reported Corporal Williams from his overwatch position on a ridge overlooking their advance route. The responses continued down the line. Echo 4 through 6 all reporting normal status, but Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His instincts, honed through 15 years of special operations across 3 different star systems, were screaming danger. The research station came into view as they crested a small hill. What they found made Rodriguez's blood run cold. The prefabricated buildings were intact, but they were covered in some kind of organic growth that pulsed rhythmically, like a massive heartbeat. Thick, rope-like tendrils connected the structures, creating a web that seemed almost alive. "What the hell is that?" Chen's voice crackled through the comm, his usual calm demeanor showing cracks. Rodriguez studied the scene through his rifle scope. The growth looked almost plant-like, but it moved with purpose, intelligence. As he watched, one of the tendrils shifted, revealing what looked like human clothing embedded within its mass. "Command, this is Echo Leader." Rodriguez spoke into his long-range transmitter. "We found the research station. Situation is complicated, requesting immediate extraction and a full xenobiology team." Static answered him. He tried again, adjusting frequencies, but got nothing except electromagnetic interference that seemed to be coming from the station itself. "Echo Leader, we've got movement," Williams reported from his position. "Multiple contacts approaching from the northwest. They're not human." Rodriguez swung his scope toward Williams's position and felt his stomach drop. Creatures were emerging from caves hidden in the valley walls. They moved on 4 legs but stood nearly 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs that ended in wickedly sharp claws. Their skin appeared to be the same organic material that covered the research station, and they moved with disturbing coordination. "Defensive positions," Rodriguez ordered. "Echo 2 and 3 fall back to the rally point. Echo 4, 5, and 6 covering fire if they get within 200 meters. The creatures spread out as they approached, demonstrating tactical awareness that made Rodriguez's skin crawl. These weren't mindless predators. They were intelligent, organized, and they had been waiting. "Sir, I count at least 30 of them," Chen reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. "And there's something else. The growth on the buildings is reacting to our presence. It's moving faster." Rodriguez looked back at the research station and saw that Chen was right. The organic tendrils were writhing more actively, and sections of the growth were beginning to detach from the buildings, forming into shapes that looked disturbingly humanoid. "Echo Team, we need to move now." Rodriguez began backing toward their extraction point, a clearing 2 clicks south where their shuttle was supposed to pick them up in 6 hours. But 6 hours suddenly seemed like an eternity. The first shot came from Williams's position. His plasma rifle discharged with a brilliant blue flash, and one of the creatures stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, the wounded area began to close itself, the organic material flowing like thick liquid to seal the damage. "They're regenerating," Williams called out. "Conventional weapons aren't putting them down." More shots followed as the creatures closed the distance with frightening speed. Rodriguez watched through his scope as his team's carefully aimed shots had minimal effect. The creatures seemed to absorb the energy from their weapons, their forms shifting and adapting with each hit. "Echo Leader, we've got a problem." Chen's voice carried a note of panic. "They're not just ahead of us. We're surrounded." Rodriguez spun around to see more creatures emerging from concealed positions behind them. The organic growth from the research station had spread during their brief engagement, creating a network of tunnels and hiding spots. They had walked into a perfectly orchestrated trap. "Command, this is Echo Leader with an emergency transmission." Rodriguez shouted into his comm, abandoning any pretense of stealth. Echo Team is under heavy contact with unknown hostiles. We are surrounded and taking casualties. Request immediate air support and extraction. Still nothing but static answered him. The creatures began their final assault, moving with inhuman speed across the broken terrain. Rodriguez watched his ammunition counter drop as he fired controlled bursts, each shot finding its mark but failing to stop the advancing threat. His team was made up of the best soldiers humanity had to offer, veterans of conflicts across known space, but they were facing something beyond their experience. Echo 2 is hit. Chen's voice came through the comm, strained with pain. These things aren't just fast, they're learning our tactics. They're adapting to our weapons in real time. Rodriguez saw Chen go down, one of the creatures having flanked his position with tactical precision that would have impressed human military strategists. Williams continued providing covering fire from his elevated position, but Rodriguez could see that he was running low on ammunition. Echo Team, rally on my position, Rodriguez ordered, falling back to a small depression that offered minimal cover. We're going to have to make our stand here. As his remaining team members converged on his position, Rodriguez realized the full scope of their situation. They were stranded on an alien world, facing an enemy that seemed specifically designed to counter human military capabilities. Their communications were down, their weapons were ineffective, and their extraction was still hours away. The creatures formed a circle around their position, but rather than attacking immediately, they seemed to be waiting for something. Rodriguez watched them through his scope, studying their movements, their coordination. There was intelligence behind their actions, a purpose that went beyond simple predation. In the distance, he could hear something else approaching. A low rumbling sound that seemed to come from beneath the ground itself. Whatever these creatures were waiting for, it was coming. Rodriguez checked his ammunition one last time and prepared for what might be humanity's last stand on Kepler 442b. The rumbling beneath the ground grew stronger, and Rodriguez felt vibrations through his boots that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. The creatures surrounding his team hadn't moved for the past 10 minutes, their grotesque forms perfectly still, except for the rhythmic pulsing of their organic skin. They were definitely waiting for something. Echo Leader, whatever's coming, it's big, Williams whispered from his position. Even from his elevated overwatch point, his voice carried an edge of fear that Rodriguez had never heard before. Williams had faced down alien war machines on 3 different worlds, but this was different. Rodriguez did a quick head count. Chen was wounded but conscious, his left arm wrapped in emergency bandages where one of the creatures had raked him with claws that seemed to secrete some kind of acid. Echo 4, Petty Officer Davidson, was down to his last magazine. Echo 5 and 6, the Johnson brothers who had joined the SEALs together, were back-to-back in the center of their small defensive position, their usual banter replaced by grim silence. The ground beneath them began to crack. Thin lines spread outward from a point roughly 50 meters away, and Rodriguez realized that whatever was coming was emerging directly in front of their position. The creatures around them began to make sounds for the first time since the engagement began. It wasn't roaring or growling, but something that sounded almost like singing, a harmonious vibration that made the air itself seem to thicken. "Sir, my equipment is going crazy," reported Echo 6, his voice tight. "Radiation levels are spiking, electromagnetic interference is off the charts, and my bioscanner is detecting organic matter moving under the entire valley floor." Rodriguez looked at his own readings and felt his stomach lurch. The valley wasn't just contaminated with alien life forms. The valley itself was alive. Every rock, every patch of dirt, every crystal formation was part of a massive organic network that had been dormant until their arrival. The cracks in the ground widened, and something began to emerge. At first, it looked like more of the organic growth they had seen at the research station, but as it continued to rise, Rodriguez realized they were looking at something far more sophisticated. It was a structure, but one that had been grown rather than built. Tall spires twisted upward like the ribs of some impossible creature, connected by membranes that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "Echo Team, we need to move," Rodriguez ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The creatures around them had closed the circle, and the newly emerged structure was blocking their planned escape route. From within the organic spires, new figures began to emerge. These were different from the 4-legged hunters that surrounded them. These walked upright on two legs, roughly humanoid in shape but clearly not human. They wore what looked like armor, but as Rodriguez studied them through his scope, he realized the armor was actually part of their bodies, grown rather than manufactured. One of the figures raised what appeared to be a weapon, and Rodriguez felt a sharp pain behind his eyes. Images flooded his mind that weren't his own. He saw the research station as it had been 6 months ago, saw the human scientists going about their work, unaware that their presence had awakened something that had been sleeping beneath the planet's surface for millennia. He saw the scientists being taken, not killed but absorbed into the organic network, their knowledge and memories preserved while their bodies were transformed into something new. The alien intelligence that had claimed this world wasn't just predatory. It was expansionist, and it learned from everything it consumed. "They're in my head," Chen gasped, clutching his helmet with his good hand. "I can see what happened to the research team. They're still alive, but they're not human anymore." Rodriguez fought against the mental intrusion, using meditation techniques he had learned during SEER training to maintain his mental barriers, but he could feel the alien presence pushing against his consciousness, probing for weaknesses, trying to understand human military doctrine and capabilities. The upright figures began to approach their position, moving with deliberate, measured steps. As they got closer, Rodriguez could see that their faces retained some human characteristics, but their eyes glowed with the same bioluminescent patterns that covered the organic structures around them. "Echo Leader, we've got incoming air contact," Williams suddenly announced. Something just entered the atmosphere, coming in fast from orbit. Rodriguez looked up and saw a streak of light cutting through the alien world's purple-tinged sky. But as he watched, he realized it wasn't the cavalry coming to rescue them. The trajectory was wrong, and the signature didn't match any human spacecraft he knew of. "That's not one of ours," he said into his comm. "Whatever it is, it's heading straight for this valley." The alien figures suddenly stopped their advance, their attention turning skyward. The creatures surrounding Rodriguez's team began to move again, but instead of attacking, they were repositioning themselves in what looked like defensive formations. The singing sound grew louder, more urgent, and the organic structures began to change shape, growing what looked like defensive weapons. The incoming object was decelerating rapidly, its approach becoming more controlled. Rodriguez adjusted his scope's magnification and tried to get a better look at whatever was coming. It was definitely a spacecraft, but the design was unlike anything in human or known alien databases. It moved with a fluid grace that suggested organic construction, but its approach pattern indicated advanced tactical awareness. "Echo Team, whatever's in that ship, the locals don't seem happy to see it," Rodriguez observed. "This might be our chance. If these things are distracted by a new threat, we might be able to break out of this encirclement." But even as he spoke, Rodriguez realized that their situation had just become far more complicated. They were now caught between two alien forces, and they had no way of knowing whether the newcomers would be any more friendly to humans than the creatures that currently surrounded them. The spacecraft settled into a hover position directly above the valley, and Rodriguez could see that it was larger than he had initially thought. Weapon ports began to open along its hull, and the air around it shimmered with energy fields that made his equipment readings spike even higher. "Echo Leader, whatever's about to happen, we're going to be right in the middle of it," Williams reported. "I've got multiple new contacts moving in from all directions. This valley is about to become a war zone." Rodriguez made a decision that went against everything in his training. Instead of trying to extract his team from the combat zone, he ordered them to dig in and prepare to observe. Sometimes the best way to survive an encounter between two hostile forces was to let them fight each other and pick up the pieces afterward. "Echo Team, defensive positions. We're going to wait this out and see what happens. Maybe we'll learn something that Command needs to know about what we're really dealing with out here." The first shots of the alien battle began to light up the sky above them, and Rodriguez found himself hoping that at least one side would prove to be less interested in absorbing human consciousness than the other. The alien battle erupted with a violence that made Rodriguez's previous combat experiences seem like training exercises. Energy beams lanced down from the hovering spacecraft, each shot precise and devastating. Where they struck the organic structures, the alien growth didn't just burn or explode. It seemed to dissolve at a molecular level, leaving behind only empty space and the acrid smell of something that had never been meant to exist. The ground-based aliens responded with weapons that defied easy categorization. Tendrils of living matter erupted from the Earth itself, reaching toward the spacecraft with impossible speed and coordination. Some carried electrical charges that created brilliant arcs of lightning across the purple sky. Others secreted clouds of what Rodriguez's sensors identified as aggressive, nanobiological agents designed to break down metallic hulls. Echo Team, stay low and keep recording, Rodriguez ordered, his voice barely audible over the sounds of alien warfare. Intelligence is going to want every detail we can capture. From his position, Rodriguez watched the humanoid figures that had emerged from the organic spires. They moved with tactical precision that rivaled his own team's training, but their coordination was perfect, too perfect. They weren't communicating through radio or hand signals. They were operating as a single organism with multiple bodies, each unit knowing exactly what the others were doing without any apparent communication delay. "Sir, I'm picking up something on the emergency frequencies," Williams reported from his overwatch position. "It's faint, but it sounds like human voices." Rodriguez switched his comm to the emergency channels and immediately heard what Williams was talking about. Buried beneath layers of static and alien interference, he could make out fragments of English, but the voices sounded wrong, distorted in a way that made his skin crawl. "Help us," came a voice that might have been female. "The integration is almost complete. They're learning everything. Military protocols, weapon specifications, fleet positions." Another voice, male this time, overlapped the first. "They know about Earth now. They know about all the colonies. Stop them before they spread." Rodriguez felt ice in his veins. If the absorbed researchers were right, this wasn't just about one alien world. This was about a threat that could spread across human space, absorbing and converting entire populations while gaining access to all their knowledge and technology. The spacecraft above began to descend, its weapons carving through the organic defenses with methodical efficiency. But Rodriguez noticed something else. Every time the energy beams struck the alien growth, small pieces of the destroyed material seemed to disappear entirely, as if they were being teleported away rather than simply vaporized. "Echo 5, are you getting readings on those weapon discharges?" Rodriguez asked. "Affirmative, sir," came the reply from the younger Johnson brother. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's not plasma, not particle beam, not coherent light. It's something that operates on quantum principles I don't understand." The ground-based aliens adapted their tactics with frightening speed. The organic structures began to change shape, creating mirrors and deflection surfaces that turned the spacecraft's own weapons against it. But the ship's pilot seemed to anticipate these adaptations, shifting firing patterns and weapon types faster than the ground forces could counter. Rodriguez was beginning to understand that he was witnessing a conflict between two completely different approaches to warfare. The ground-based aliens fought like a biological immune system, adapting and evolving their responses in real time. The spacecraft's operators fought like engineers, using precise technical solutions to overcome each defensive measure. "Echo Leader, we've got movement on our perimeter," Chen reported, his wounded arm making his movements awkward but determined. "The locals haven't forgotten about us. They're repositioning some of their forces." Rodriguez saw that Chen was right. While the main alien force was engaged with the spacecraft, a smaller group of the four-legged hunters was moving to surround their position. But their approach was different now, more cautious. The aliens had clearly learned from their earlier encounter with human weapons and were adapting their tactics accordingly. "Echo Team, prepare for contact, but hold fire until I give the order," Rodriguez commanded. "Let's see what they want." The lead creature approached to within 50 meters of their position before stopping. It reared up on its hind legs, bringing its full 8-foot height to bear, and Rodriguez realized it was trying to communicate. The bioluminescent patterns on its skin began to pulse in complex sequences, and suddenly Rodriguez's comm unit crackled to life with synthesized human speech. "Human soldiers," the artificial voice said, clearly generated by some kind of translation system. "Your presence has complicated our defense. The harvesters above seek to claim this world as they have claimed others. We propose temporary cooperation." Rodriguez felt his world shift. These aliens, the ones who had absorbed the research team, were calling the spacecraft's occupants harvesters, and they were asking for help. What kind of cooperation? Rodriguez responded, speaking directly toward the creature. You possess weapons technology that operates on principles different from ours. Combined tactical approach may prove effective against Harvester adaptations. In exchange, we offer safe passage from this world. Williams's voice cut through on a private channel. Sir, I don't trust them. They absorbed an entire research team. I know, Rodriguez replied on the same channel. But if there's a bigger threat here, we need to understand what we're dealing with. The spacecraft above seemed to notice the communication between the humans and the ground-based aliens. Its weapons fire shifted, targeting the area around Rodriguez's position with increasing accuracy. Energy beams began to bracket their defensive position, each shot coming closer than the last. Human soldiers, the creature continued, immediate decision required. Harvesters are targeting your position for elimination, cooperation, or destruction. Rodriguez made a command decision that would either save his team or doom them all. What do you need us to do? The creature's bioluminescent pattern shifted to what might have been relief. Your weapons fire concentrated energy in narrow beams. Our biological systems absorb and redirect broad-spectrum attacks but are vulnerable to focused penetration. Target the Harvester ship's ventral hull section. Coordinates we will provide. Rodriguez looked up at the spacecraft, which was now close enough for him to see details of its construction. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of adaptive metal that shifted and flowed like liquid, while maintaining structural integrity. But as he studied it through his scope, he could see what the alien was talking about. There was a section on the underside of the ship where the flowing metal pattern was different, more rigid. Echo Team, we're going to take some shots at the alien ship, Rodriguez announced. All weapons concentrate fire on the coordinates I'm marking. He designated the target area on his team's shared tactical display and gave the order to fire. 6 plasma rifles discharged simultaneously, their brilliant blue beams converging on the spacecraft's vulnerable section. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The spacecraft lurched in the air as its hull was breached, and Rodriguez could see atmosphere venting from the damaged area. But instead of crashing, the ship began to ascend rapidly, apparently deciding that retreat was the better part of valor. Harvesters withdraw for now, the creature reported, but they will return with adapted defenses. This world is no longer safe for any of us. As the spacecraft disappeared into the alien sky, Rodriguez realized that his team had just become involved in an interstellar conflict that was far larger and more dangerous than anyone on Earth could imagine. The silence that followed the Harvester ship's retreat was more unsettling than the battle itself had been. Rodriguez watched through his scope as the organic structures throughout the valley began to shift and change, their defensive configurations morphing into something that looked almost like communication arrays. The bioluminescent patterns that covered everything pulsed in synchronized waves that extended far beyond what his eyes could see. Echo Leader, I'm picking up massive electromagnetic activity, Williams reported from his overwatch position. It's like they're broadcasting to something in deep space. The lead creature that had communicated with them earlier approached their position again, moving with what Rodriguez was beginning to recognize as a form of respect. Its translation system crackled to life once more. Human soldiers, we must share critical information. The Harvesters you helped us repel are part of a collective that has consumed 17 star systems in this galactic sector. Your species appears in their targeting database. Rodriguez felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean, appears in their targeting database? Harvester technology functions by absorption and replication. When they encounter new species, they catalog biological and technological characteristics for future exploitation. Your solar system coordinates were transmitted before we severed their connection. The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Not only had humanity's location been compromised, but the Harvesters now had detailed information about human technology, tactics, and capabilities from studying his team's engagement. How long before they reach Earth? Rodriguez asked, though he dreaded the answer. Harvester fleets move through dimensional fold space, with current galactic positioning approximately 18 of your months. Chen's voice cut through on the team frequency. Sir, we need to get this information to command immediately. Earth needs to start preparing defenses, but Rodriguez was already thinking beyond immediate warnings. What about you? What's your species story? How did you end up fighting these Harvesters? The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Rodriguez was learning to interpret as a form of sadness. We are what remains of the Kithra collective. Our homeworld fell to the Harvesters 300 years ago. Those who escaped merged with organic technology to survive, becoming what you see now. We are both individual and collective, preserving the memories and knowledge of our people while adapting to resist harvester absorption techniques. Rodriguez looked around the valley with new understanding. The organic growth, the absorbed research team, even the creatures themselves. It was all part of a desperate survival strategy developed by a species that had already lost everything to the harvesters. The human researchers you absorbed, Rodriguez said, are they still alive in there? Their consciousness persists within our collective memory. Their knowledge of human military capabilities has been invaluable in understanding how to coordinate with your forces. They volunteered for integration when they understood the threat approaching your species. Williams's voice came through with urgent intensity. Echo Leader, I've got multiple contacts incoming from orbit. Looks like the harvesters called for backup. Rodriguez swung his scope skyward and saw them. 3 more spacecraft, larger than the first, descending through the atmosphere with the methodical precision of a planned invasion. But these ships were different. Their hulls bore adaptations that looked suspiciously similar to human technology, as if the harvesters had already begun incorporating what they had learned from the earlier engagement. Human soldiers, the Kythera leader communicated. The harvesters return with modified vessels. Your previous tactics will be less effective. We must adapt our cooperation. Rodriguez made a decision that went against every principle of his training but felt absolutely right given the circumstances. What do you need from us? Full tactical integration. Your team's knowledge and capabilities merge temporarily with our collective consciousness. This will allow optimal coordination but requires temporary neural linking. Chen's voice was sharp with alarm. Sir, that sounds a lot like what happened to the research team. Temporary integration can be reversed, the Kythera explained. Permanent absorption requires consent and extended exposure. Combat linking preserves individual consciousness while sharing tactical awareness. Rodriguez looked at his team, 5 soldiers who had followed him across half the galaxy and were now facing a threat that could determine the fate of humanity itself. The approaching harvester ships were already beginning their descent, and conventional tactics had proven insufficient. Echo Team, this is going to be the strangest order I've ever given, Rodriguez announced. We're going to link with the Kythera for this engagement. Maintain your individual awareness and be ready to break the connection on my command. Sir, are you sure about this? Davidson asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. No, Rodriguez replied honestly, but I'm sure that we can't stop those ships with our weapons alone. And I'm sure that Earth needs to know what's coming. The Kythera leader extended what looked like organic tendrils toward Rodriguez's position. Physical contact required. Neural interface will establish gradually. Resist the urge to fight the connection. Allow awareness to expand while maintaining core identity. Rodriguez reached out and grasped the nearest tendril. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever experienced. His consciousness suddenly expanded beyond his individual awareness, encompassing the entire valley and everyone in it. He could feel his team's thoughts and emotions, the Kythera's collective memories spanning centuries, and even echoes of the absorbed research team's personalities. But instead of feeling overwhelmed or consumed, Rodriguez found that his tactical awareness had increased exponentially. He could see the approaching harvester ships from multiple angles simultaneously, track their adaptive modifications in real time, and coordinate responses with a precision that no human military unit had ever achieved. Echo Team status report, he said, though he already knew the answer through the shared consciousness. This is incredible, Williams responded, his mental voice carrying wonder along with his words. I can see tactical possibilities that would take hours to calculate normally. The harvesters began their attack, but this time the combined human Kythera force was ready. Rodriguez found himself directing not just his 5-man team but hundreds of organic defenders, each unit positioned with mathematical precision based on the approaching enemy's capabilities and limitations. Echo 2, target the lead ship's primary weapon array, Rodriguez commanded, though Chen was already moving into position before the words were spoken. The neural link allowed for coordination that operated faster than verbal communication. But as the battle intensified, Rodriguez began to notice something troubling. The longer he remained connected to the Kythera collective, the more difficult it became to distinguish his own thoughts from the shared consciousness. The absorption process wasn't happening quickly, but it was happening, and in the deepest parts of the collective memory, he could sense something that the Kithara leader hadn't told him. The neural linking technology they were using wasn't originally Kithara at all. It was adapted harvester technology, modified for defensive purposes. Rodriguez realized with growing horror that in trying to fight the harvesters, the Kithara had inadvertently become something very similar to what they were fighting against. The line between salvation and assimilation was thinner than anyone had realized. Rodriguez fought to maintain his individual consciousness as the battle raged above them. The neural link with the Kithara collective was becoming stronger with each passing moment, and he could feel his team's personalities beginning to blur at the edges. Through the shared awareness, he could sense William struggling with the same issue. His sniper's focused mind trying to maintain clear boundaries between self and collective. The three harvester ships had adapted their tactics based on the previous engagement, but the combined human Kithara force was adapting even faster. Rodriguez found himself directing organic weapons he had never seen before, coordinating attacks that utilized both human precision and Kithara regenerative capabilities. It was devastatingly effective, but the cost was becoming apparent. Echo Leader, Chen's voice came through the link, though it carried harmonics that weren't quite human anymore. I can feel myself slipping. How much longer can we maintain this connection? Rodriguez tried to respond, but realized he wasn't sure which thoughts were his own anymore. The Kithara collective memories were vast and seductive, offering knowledge and experiences spanning centuries. It would be so easy to let go, to become part of something larger and more powerful than any individual human consciousness. But then he heard something that cut through the neural static like a blade. Deep in the collective memory, buried beneath layers of Kithara history and absorbed knowledge, he found the voices of the original research team. Dr. Sarah, Chen, no relation to his teammate, was trying to communicate. Something urgent. The harvesters aren't just collectors. Her voice echoed through the collective consciousness. They're refugees. Their original species was consumed by something even worse, and now they're trying to preserve consciousness by absorbing other species before that same threat finds them. Rodriguez focused on Dr. Chen's memories, fighting through the neural interference to understand what she had discovered. The images that came through the link were terrifying beyond anything he had experienced. Vast entities of pure entropy moving between galaxies, consuming not just matter and energy but the very concept of existence itself. The harvesters were fleeing from these beings, trying to preserve as much conscious life as possible in the only way they knew how. "Sir, we've got a problem." William's voice cut through the revelations. "The harvester ships are changing tactics. They're not trying to destroy us anymore. They're trying to communicate." Rodriguez pulled his awareness back to the immediate battle and saw that Williams was right. The three ships had ceased their attacks and were broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Through the neural link, he could understand their transmissions even though they weren't in any human language. "Collective entity," the transmission began. "We detect unified consciousness incorporating multiple species. You have achieved partial synthesis. We offer complete integration. Together we can preserve your knowledge before the Devourers arrive in this galaxy." The Kithara leader's response came through the link with a mixture of hatred and fear. "We know what your integration means. Complete absorption, loss of individual identity. We have chosen a different path. Individual identity is illusion," the harvesters replied. "Collective consciousness is preservation. The Devourers consume even the memory of existence. We offer survival." Rodriguez realized that both sides in this conflict were trying to preserve life in their own way, but their methods were fundamentally incompatible. The harvesters believed that complete absorption into a collective consciousness was the only way to preserve knowledge and identity before something even worse arrived. The Kithara had chosen to maintain individual consciousness within a collective framework, but at the cost of constantly fighting against absorption. "Echo Team," Rodriguez broadcast through the neural link, "we need to break this connection now. I can feel the absorption accelerating." But even as he said it, Rodriguez found it difficult to want to break the link. The collective consciousness offered solutions to problems he had never even considered. Through the shared awareness, he could see defensive strategies that could protect Earth from the coming harvester fleet. Technologies that could revolutionize human civilization, knowledge that could advance his species by centuries. "Sir?" Davidson's voice came through, barely recognizable now. "What if this is the right choice? What if joining the collective is the only way to save humanity?" Rodriguez felt the seductive pull of that logic. The collective could protect Earth better than any human military force. The absorbed research team had volunteered precisely because they understood the impossible nature of the threat approaching human space. Maybe individual identity was a luxury that humanity couldn't afford in the face of galactic extinction. But then another voice cut through the neural static. It was Chen, his Chen, not the doctor, and his words were sharp with desperation. "Sir, I can see my sister's face, but I can't remember her name. We're losing ourselves." That single statement hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Individual identity wasn't just about preserving consciousness. It was about preserving the connections and relationships that made consciousness meaningful. The collective offered survival, but it was survival without the love, loss, and personal connections that made life worth living. Echo Team. Emergency disconnection, Rodriguez ordered, using every ounce of his training and willpower to fight against the neural link. Break contact now. The process was agonizing. It felt like tearing away parts of his own consciousness, leaving him smaller and more limited than he had been moments before. But as the link dissolved, Rodriguez felt the return of something precious. His own thoughts, his own memories, his own sense of self around him. His team was going through the same process, each man fighting to reclaim his individual identity from the seductive embrace of the collective. Williams was the first to fully disconnect, his sniper's discipline serving him well in the mental battle. Chen and Davidson followed, though Rodriguez could see that the experience had changed them all. Only the Johnson brothers seemed to be having trouble. Rodriguez could see them through his scope, still physically connected to the Kythera tendrils, their faces showing the internal struggle between individual consciousness and collective absorption. Echo 5. Echo 6 report, Rodriguez called out, but got no response. The brothers were standing perfectly still, their eyes reflecting the same bioluminescent patterns that covered the Kythera structures around them. Williams had regained enough of himself to function independently. "Sir, I've got a clean shot. I can sever the connections." "Negative," Rodriguez replied, though every instinct told him that Williams was right. "If we force a disconnection while they're this deep, it could cause permanent brain damage. Instead, Rodriguez made a decision that went against everything the neural link had taught him about collective efficiency. He approached the Johnson brothers on foot, speaking to them as individuals rather than as components of a larger system. "Marcus," he said to Echo 5, using the man's first name instead of his call sign. "Remember why you joined the SEALs. Remember what you told me about wanting to protect your family back on New Damascus." There was a flicker of recognition in the younger Johnson's eyes. The bioluminescent patterns on his skin began to fade slightly. "David," Rodriguez continued, turning to Echo 6, "remember your promise to your wife. Remember the letter you wrote before this mission, the one you asked me to deliver if something happened to you." The connection between the brothers and the Kythera collective began to weaken. Rodriguez could see the alien tendrils physically loosening their grip as the two men fought to reclaim their individual identities. "That's it," Rodriguez encouraged. "Hold on to who you are. Don't let go of the things that make you human." Both brothers suddenly broke free from the neural link, stumbling backward with expressions of confusion and relief. But their disconnection had consequences that Rodriguez hadn't anticipated. Without the enhanced coordination provided by the neural link, the combined human Kythera defense against the Harvester ships began to collapse. "Echo Leader," the Kythera leader communicated, its translation system crackling with what sounded like disappointment. "Your disconnection has compromised our defensive capabilities. The Harvesters are exploiting the coordination gap." Rodriguez looked up to see that the alien was right. The 3 Harvester ships had resumed their attack, and without the neural link providing instantaneous coordination, the organic defenses were being systematically destroyed. Energy beams carved through the valley's structures with methodical precision, each shot eliminating key defensive positions. "We need another solution," Rodriguez announced to both his team and the Kythera collective, "something that doesn't require us to give up our humanity." Williams, back in his sniper position, called out, "Sir, I'm seeing something interesting. The Harvester ships are avoiding certain areas of the valley. There's a pattern to their targeting." Rodriguez studied the battle through his scope and realized that Williams was right. The Harvesters were destroying the organic structures, but carefully avoiding areas where absorbed human consciousness was stored. They weren't just trying to eliminate resistance, they were trying to preserve human knowledge for their own purposes. They want to absorb the research team. Rodriguez realized. That's why they came back. They need human knowledge to adapt their technology for the invasion of Earth. The Kythera leader's response carried new urgency. If the Harvesters obtain complete human tactical and technological knowledge, your species' resistance capabilities will be compromised before their invasion begins. Rodriguez looked at his team, 5 men who had volunteered for a routine reconnaissance mission and found themselves at the center of an interstellar conflict that could determine humanity's survival. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing technology they barely understood. But they were still human, still capable of the kind of individual Initi Rodriguez's plan was born from desperation and human stubbornness in equal measure. While the Harvesters and Kythera fought with the calculated precision of collective intelligences, humans had always excelled at the kind of chaotic, unpredictable tactics that emerged from individual initiative and split-second decision-making. Echo Team, we're going to split up, Rodriguez announced, knowing that every military doctrine he had ever learned said the opposite. Solo operations, no coordination, complete radio silence. Each man chooses his own target and method of attack. Chen looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Sir, that goes against everything we've been trained to do. Exactly, Rodriguez replied. Both sides in this fight think in terms of coordinated collective action. They can predict and counter organized tactics because that's how their minds work, but they can't predict chaos. Williams was already moving, his sniper instincts telling him to find a new position where he wouldn't be expected. I understand, sir. No patterns, no predictable behavior. Make ourselves impossible to anticipate. The Kythera leader's translation system crackled with confusion. Human soldiers. Dispersal reduces tactical efficiency. Collective coordination maximizes effectiveness. That's the point, Rodriguez replied. We're not trying to be efficient. We're trying to be human. Rodriguez watched his team scatter across the valley, each man disappearing into the chaos of the ongoing battle. The Harvester ships continued their methodical destruction of the Kythera defenses, but Rodriguez could see that they were having trouble adapting to the sudden change in human behavior. Their targeting systems seemed to be designed for tracking coordinated unit movements, not individual actors operating without any apparent plan. Williams found a position in the ruins of one of the organic spires and began taking shots at seemingly random targets on the Harvester ships. His selection criteria made no tactical sense. He was shooting at communication arrays, navigation sensors, even decorative hull elements. But each shot forced the ships to adapt their defensive systems in slightly different ways, creating small inefficiencies that began to accumulate. Chen, meanwhile, had disappeared entirely. Rodriguez lost track of him for nearly 10 minutes before spotting him rappelling down the side of a cliff face that no sane soldier would attempt to climb. His destination appeared to be a small cave system that had been exposed when the Harvester weapons carved through the valley walls. Davidson and the Johnson brothers had each chosen completely different approaches. Davidson was moving through the battlefield like a guerrilla fighter, using hit-and-run tactics against the ground-based Harvester forces that had deployed from the ships. The Johnson brothers had somehow acquired Kythera organic weapons and were using them in ways that clearly hadn't been intended by their designers, creating improvised explosive devices from biological components. Rodriguez himself chose the most dangerous and irrational course of action he could think of. He began climbing toward the lowest hovering Harvester ship, using the organic structures as handholds and cover. It was suicide, except that it was so obviously suicide that the ship's defensive system seemed unable to classify him as a legitimate threat. The Harvester's mistake was assuming that no rational tactical mind would order such dispersed, seemingly random actions. They kept trying to find the pattern, the coordinated strategy behind the human movements. Their collective intelligence was powerful, but it was also predictable in its efficiency. Rodriguez reached a position where he could see into one of the Harvester ship's open weapon ports. The interior was a maze of organic technology similar to what the Kythera used, but more refined, more perfectly integrated. He could see absorbed beings from multiple species working in perfect harmony, their individual consciousnesses subsumed into the collective purpose. But he also saw something else. In the deepest parts of the ship, Isolated in what looked like containment systems were individual consciousnesses that hadn't been fully absorbed. The harvesters were keeping samples of unintegrated minds, preserving the spark of individual thought that their collective intelligence couldn't fully understand or replicate. Rodriguez activated his emergency transmitter, broadcasting on all frequencies. Any human consciousness aboard harvester vessels, this is Echo Leader. If you can hear this, we're coming for you. The response was immediate and heartbreaking. Dozens of voices answered him, speaking in languages from across human space. Scientists, colonists, military personnel from outposts that had been attacked months or even years ago. They were all still alive inside the harvester ships, their individual minds preserved but isolated from each other and from any hope of rescue. Echo Leader, came a voice he recognized. This is Commander Sarah Martinez, formerly of the exploration vessel Pathfinder. We've been studying the harvesters from inside their ships. Their collective intelligence has a critical weakness. Rodriguez pressed himself against the ship's hull, trying to stay hidden while listening to Martinez's transmission. What kind of weakness? They can't truly understand individual decision-making because they've never experienced it. Their predictive algorithms are based on collective logic. When faced with truly random individual choices, their systems become overloaded trying to find patterns that don't exist. Rodriguez looked around the battlefield and realized that his team's chaotic tactics were already having an effect. The 3 harvester ships were beginning to show signs of system strain. Their movements were becoming less coordinated, their weapons fire less precise. The collective intelligence that controlled them was struggling to process the sheer unpredictability of human individual action. All absorbed human consciousness, Rodriguez broadcast. Can you create individual disruptions within the harvester systems? Random actions, personal choices, anything that breaks their collective patterns. What followed was the most beautiful act of rebellion Rodriguez had ever witnessed. Throughout the 3 ships, individual human minds began asserting themselves against their collective integration. Some took control of weapon systems and fired in random directions. Others accessed navigation controls and introduced chaotic elements into the ship's flight patterns. A few managed to activate internal communications and began singing, each person choosing a different song from their personal memories. The effect on the harvester collective intelligence was devastating. Rodriguez watched through his scope as the ships began to lose coordination entirely. Their perfect, efficient movements became erratic and confused as their systems tried to process hundreds of individual decisions happening simultaneously within their own consciousness. Echo Team, Rodriguez broadcast, abandoning radio silence. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. The harvesters are losing cohesion, Williams responded from his sniper position. Sir, I can see structural failures beginning in the lead ship. Their collective intelligence is starting to break down. But Rodriguez also noticed something else. The Kythera forces in the valley had stopped fighting. They were watching the human actions with what appeared to be fascination. Their collective consciousness trying to understand how such seemingly random behavior could be so effective. The battle was becoming something entirely different from what anyone had expected. It was no longer a conflict between 2 collective intelligences, but a demonstration of the power of individual human consciousness to disrupt systems that couldn't account for genuine unpredictability, ative and unpredictable tactics that no collective consciousness could fully anticipate. Echo Team, Rodriguez announced. We're going to do something that neither the harvesters nor the Kythera will expect. We're going to act like humans. The chaos that Rodriguez had unleashed was spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. Aboard the 3 harvester ships, individual human consciousness was reasserting itself with a vengeance that shook the very foundations of the collective intelligence. What had started as random disruptions was evolving into something far more significant. A revolution of individual minds against collective absorption. Rodriguez watched through his scope as the lead harvester ship began to literally tear itself apart. Systems that had been integrated with perfect efficiency for centuries were now fighting against each other, as absorbed human minds chose different priorities. Different goals, different definitions of survival itself. Weapon systems fired at random targets, navigation computers plotted conflicting courses, and life support systems began operating according to individual preferences rather than collective needs. Commander Martinez, Rodriguez broadcast. "What's your status aboard the ships?" "Echo Leader, we've achieved something unprecedented," came the reply, Martinez's voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We've created isolated pockets of individual consciousness within the collective matrix. The harvesters can't reintegrate us without destroying their own operational systems." From his position on the ship's hull, Rodriguez could see the internal battles raging through transparent sections of the alien vessel. Absorbed beings from multiple species were moving independently for the first time in years or decades, their actions guided by personal memories and individual desires rather than collective purpose. But the most remarkable thing was happening on the surface of Kepler 442b itself. The Kythera Collective was undergoing its own transformation, inspired by the human demonstration of successful individual action within a collective framework. Individual Kythera consciousness began to emerge from their shared awareness. "Human soldiers," came a new voice through the translation system, but this time it wasn't the collective speaking. It was an individual Kythera speaking for itself. "I am Thane Kamor, formerly a military strategist before our homeworld fell. I choose to maintain individual identity while contributing to collective survival." More voices followed, each Kythera individual asserting their personal identity while remaining connected to the larger collective. It was exactly what Rodriguez had hoped for, a middle path between the total absorption of the harvesters and the complete isolation of pure individual consciousness. Williams's voice crackled through the comm. "Sir, the harvester ships are beginning emergency departure procedures, but they're doing it wrong. Different parts of each ship are trying to escape in different directions." Rodriguez saw that Williams was right. The collective intelligence that had controlled the ships was fragmenting under the pressure of managing so many individual consciousnesses making independent decisions. What emerged was something entirely new. Ships controlled by democratic consensus among their absorbed inhabitants rather than unified collective will. "This is Commander Martinez," came another transmission. "Echo Leader, we're taking control of our ships. The absorbed humans and liberated aliens are working together to chart new courses. We're not going back to harvesting other species." Rodriguez felt a surge of hope mixed with concern. "Where will you go? What's your plan for dealing with the devourers that the harvesters were fleeing from?" "We're going to find a different solution," Martinez replied. "The harvesters were right that something terrible is coming from outside this galaxy. But absorption and collective consciousness aren't the only ways to preserve knowledge and identity. We're going to build something new, a federation of individual minds working together by choice rather than compulsion." The three ships began their departure from Kepler 442b, but their movements were different now. Instead of the perfect coordination of collective intelligence, they moved with the complex, sometimes messy patterns of democratic decision-making. It was less efficient, but it was also more resilient, more adaptable, more fundamentally alive. Rodriguez began his descent from the alien ship. Rappelling down through the organic structures toward where his team was regrouping, the valley looked different now. The Kythera had begun modifying their organic technology to support individual consciousness rather than suppress it. What had been a uniform collective was becoming a community of distinct individuals who chose to work together. "Echo Team, sound off," Rodriguez called as he reached the valley floor. The responses came back with a vitality that hadn't been there since they'd first linked with the collective. Each man sounded like himself again. But more than that, they sounded like they had learned something fundamental about what it meant to be human in a universe full of collective intelligences. "Echo 2, Williams here. Sir, I've been thinking about what we just witnessed. We didn't defeat the harvesters through superior firepower or technology. We defeated them by being ourselves so completely that their system couldn't process us." Chen's voice carried wonder. "It's like we accidentally discovered a new form of warfare, fighting collective intelligence with individual unpredictability." Davidson and the Johnson brothers checked in with similar observations. They had all seen something remarkable happen when individual human consciousness refused to be subsumed into collective efficiency. It wasn't just resistance, it was transformation, both for humans and for the aliens they encountered. The Kythera leader, now speaking as an individual named Kethvos Prime, approached Rodriguez's position. "Human soldiers, what you have accomplished changes everything. For 3 centuries, we believed the choice was between absorption and isolation. You have shown us a third path. Rodriguez looked around the valley, seeing it not as a battlefield but as a potential model for something unprecedented in galactic history. What do you mean? A confederation of individual minds, each species maintaining its own identity while sharing knowledge and resources voluntarily. No absorption, no collective override of individual choice, but still unified against common threats. The implications were staggering. Instead of humanity facing the coming devourer threat alone, they could be part of a galactic alliance of species that had chosen cooperation over absorption. The Harvesters would carry word of this new possibility to other star systems, potentially transforming the entire approach to preserving consciousness in the face of extinction. Rodriguez activated his long-range communicator, finally able to reach beyond the electromagnetic interference that had plagued the valley. Command, this is Echo Leader with a priority transmission. We have made contact with friendly alien forces and have critical intelligence about threats to human space. Request immediate diplomatic contact protocols and xenobiology teams. As he waited for a response, Rodriguez looked at his team. 5 men who had volunteered for a simple reconnaissance mission and ended up changing the course of galactic history. They had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or military might, but the unpredictable, chaotic, beautiful complexity of individual human consciousness refusing to be absorbed into something larger than itself. The distress call that had echoed across the valley had been answered, but not by the rescue force anyone had expected. It had been answered by humanity's fundamental refusal to stop being human, even in the face of forces that could consume entire star systems. In the distance, Rodriguez could see new ships approaching, human vessels responding to his transmission. But they weren't coming to rescue a lost team anymore. They were coming to begin negotiations for humanity's entry into something unprecedented, a galactic confederation based on the radical idea that individual consciousness was worth preserving, protecting and celebrating rather than absorbing or suppressing. The Valley of Kepler 442b had become the birthplace of a new form of interstellar civilization, one that honored both individual identity and collective cooperation. And it all started with 6 humans who refused to stop being themselves no matter what the universe threw at them.